Hey, what's going on, Flash Mob? It's your boy Flash back again with another video. And one of the things that I can honestly say really helped take my work to the next level was color grading. I've been using Davinci Resolve now for about 3 years, and I noticed that when I started coloring my videos with more attention to detail is when my work started to stand out. So if that's something you've been thinking about or really just avoiding altogether because you didn't know how to get started, this is the video that's going to help you. I'm going to be sharing all of the techniques I personally use on my footage, so hopefully this is something that helps you guys out. Let's hop over to Davinci Resolve. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new timeline. And then what I want to do is take the files that I want to use, so some of the clips. So in this case, I'm just going to use some of the ones that I used before, make it nice and easy. So let's use the 4 that I did before. So let's copy those. And we can just see what I have, nothing too crazy. So her using the ab roller, one of her from the other angle using the ab roller, another one with the ab roller, and something where she's actually talking to camera. So here we go. So we have these 4 clips, we have it looking good, cool. So the first thing you want to do is actually go into the color page in Davinci Resolve, and we'll look at how I build my node tree. So let me just delete everything for you real quick. I just delete all of them and we'll start from scratch. So the first thing I do is hit Command S and I'll create my first node. I'll hit the tab button. I'll call this Color Space Transform. And then like I said before, I'll go to the Color Space Transform effects in the color page and just drop that on. That brings me up to this page. And I'm going to select the red gamut, red wide gamut RGB for my color input space. And then for my input gamma, I use the log 3G10. And then we have something that looks like this. So a lot of people would say that this is perfect, like this is ready to go. But we don't do that. We like to take it a step further and make sure that we get exactly what we want out of the camera with the footage that we're using. So the next thing I'll do is create another serial node. I'll select the color space transform node and I'll hit Shift S a couple of times because I want those nodes to fall in front of the color space transform. And then I'll call this my curves. So I hit tab again, I'll call this curves. I'll do this one again and I will call it, and I'll hit tab again and I'll call this my primaries. And then I'll make one more with Shift S and I will call that my color correction. So color correction. And then what I would do from there is I'll work from the left back to the right. So in this terms, the first thing I want to do is do a bit of a color correction. And for me, I feel like based on her skin, that it's just a little too warm. So I might just dial that back a little bit to get something a little bit more neutral. And then the tint just seems a little bit pinkish, so I might come back a little bit on that one. And I'm just more or less looking at the white floor or this area of the wall here to just kind of get a feel for what I want. So I just keep playing with that until I get something that I like. This way might be too green, then I'll come back, something about there, and then again, I'll go too far, one direction, come back. And that looks okay to me. Inner skin, it is looking a little bit green, right? If I look at it there, it's looking a little bit green. And let's go over to our vector scope. Let's take a look where the skin falls. Yeah, so you see this line right here. This is the skin tone indicator. If I hover my mouse over that, you can see we're kind of off the line right now. So we got to do something about that. We're going to really make some fine adjustments to this later, but just to kind of get in the ballpark, I like to go over to my primaries again. So in the gamma is where our skin tones usually lie. So right now it's kind of green. So what do we got to do? We got to go the opposite direction. So if you guys take a look there, it's just kind of taking the skin tones and just moving it closer to where it's falling properly on this line here. So if you look at it again, if I go green, it's moving back that way. If I go back to magenta, now we're kind of falling in that right space for her skin tones. So that's cool. When I'm happy with my color correction, I'll kind of park it there, and then I'll move over to my primary. So this is where I do things like the exposure, pretty much everything else. So if I want to adjust her exposure of the frame, maybe her skin a little bit, maybe the highlights, this is where I'll do it here. So in the primaries here is where I'll come again. So I'll just kind of move this around. Let's change this back to the parade. And here's our information right here. So our blacks are almost as low as it can go. We're almost crushing those blacks. So if you want to, we can go down a bit. In this case, I kind of like it about here. For me in the mid-tones, which is her skin and everything like that, I feel like maybe I just want to boost that a bit. So I'll come up just a little bit. So somewhere around there. And then on the gain, I also want to add some more to the gain here. Just give it a little bit more life. So you have something that looks like that. And then what I'll do is I'll just come back again and just drop the black down a little bit more. Just a little bit. So we have something that looks like that, and it's kind of starting to look good. If we turn off everything and turn it back on, you guys can kind of see how far we went. Not bad. And then we'll look at the curves. So if you go over here, this is our curves right here. And this is where I will just add a little bit of contrast. So again, I'll make a point here in the blacks, bring it down just a little bit, right about there. And then probably make one around here, closer to the mid-tones, to just boost up her skin a bit. Let's give it some more contrast there. And again, if we just look at what we did with the curves here, just a tiny bit of contrast was added. Well, not really a tiny bit, quite a bit of contrast was added here, which to me is pretty good. And I'm happy with that in terms of the overall look of the footage. In my primaries, curves, and color correction, and my color space, I'm pretty happy with that. What we do next is start messing around with our look and really start bringing attention to the skin and making sure that we have our skin in the right place. So here's where I want to create something called a parallel node. So to do that, what I'll do is I'll create a new node hitting Command S with the control space transform being selected. Then I'll make a new node for me. Then I'll hit Command P to make it a parallel node. And the reason why I want to do this is because I want to separate the skin and the look, right? So this is what I'm going to make my look. So I'm going to hit tab and make this my look node. And what I want to do here is make this my skin node. So I want to separate it from everything else that's happening back here. So essentially what I want to do is be able to isolate the look in this node and isolate the skin in this node without affecting everything else that happened before it. So that's why you make a parallel node. So for my look, I'm going for something a little bit more, let's say, edgy and, I don't know, a little bit more cinematic if we want to use that word. But the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to add some cyan into my shadows. So if I start pulling this back, you guys can see I'm starting to add some cyan into the shadows here, which is exactly what I'm going for. Now, conversely, this is now adding cyan into the skin as well. So what I'm going to want to do is come back over to my gamma, and I'll just do the reverse to kind of get that skin to go back a little bit. Let's push it a little bit more in this direction. And then same thing, just the opposite here to bring it back into midtones. And now let's look at that. So you guys can see what I'm starting to do with my look here. We went from that to that while still maintaining our skin tones here. So I'm just going for that little bit of that teal and orange vibe. So you guys will start seeing this take shape in a minute. So in terms of my look, I could stretch it more if I really want to, but in this case, I think I'm okay with that, which is not bad. But there's a few things here that I want to try and fix, which is her skin. It's still kind of looking a little green to me. Let's go back over to the vector scope. And if we highlight her, yeah, it's still kind of leaning a little bit off that line, which I don't want. I want to make these look a little bit more better. So what I'll do is I'll go into the skin and I'm going to go to my selector, my qualifier, I should say. And I'm just going to start looking at this skin. I'm going to focus on the skin and I'm going to try and change the way that this skin looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to click on a part of her skin here. And that's going to give me something to start with. I'm going to hit Shift H. And it's just basically going to show me what we kind of have selected right now. And then what I can do from there is I could play around with these parameters if I wanted to. So this will kind of move everything around, right? If I go to the width, it'll spread it apart so I can get more of her skin in there whilst keeping some of the stuff I don't want. Somewhere around there. Softness, again, somewhere around there is where I want it. We'll go to this section here, so we'll just get a little bit more there. And then we'll see. This is where that's going to go. Play around with it a little bit more. No, we don't want anything in that direction. So we're good there. And then the luminance is where this one's going to really start taking effect because we have some skin tone in the lights, mediums, and darks of her, right? So we're going to want to play around with this to try and pull in some more of that. So that's where this is going to work right here. So right about there, we're starting to get more of that skin in. And then on the high end, we want to see how much of that skin we can also get. So something like that. It's cool. Yeah. Soften it out a bit and then do a little bit more over here. So now we have a pretty decent look here. And then we can also play around with these. So this is what's going to give us a bit of a more cleaner and more softer selection. So it's not so harsh. We can clean up some of this white a bit. So some of what we don't want, we'll do that. Same thing with the black, like some of her pants is kind of selected in her hair. We don't really want too much of that. You just play around with this until you get a selection on her skin that makes sense. So in this case, we'll just kind of keep playing there. Now the blur is something we want to also add because we don't want any hard, harsh edges on it. So I'm going to boost that up a bit. And we're going to denoise it also a little bit, not too much. Then we have something that kind of looks like this in our skin selection. So if you hit Shift H again, it'll deselect everything. And now if we start playing around when we have the skin node selected, we start playing around with our hue and saturation, you can see we can do some really crazy stuff to her skin, and it's only affecting her skin. That's it. Nothing else. So if we look at our skin tone indicator here, we can see that we're still just a bit off of that line. So what I like to do is just use my hue indicator and just start coming over a bit until that line is on the line. So this way, too much, and if you look at her skin, she's starting to look like a Oompa Loompa. And if we come back this way, we start looking like, okay, this is how a person's skin should look, right? And if we want to, we can just add some more red back into her skin with the gamma primary. And let's take a look at how we're looking here. So that's where we were. This is where we are now, where we were, where we are now. And for me, my personal I feel like it's a bit saturated. So what I might do in this case is just go here and just bring it back a lot. So that's too much. And then I'll just slowly start adding back some saturation here until it looks good. So right about there to me looks pretty good. I like that. One more adjustment. I'll add some more green into the shadows. And drop this down a bit more. And then whatever we do on there, we got it fixed on the skin again. So I'm going to move the hue back over. Get our skin back to where we want it. And I'm going to, actually just going to give it a little bit more contrast here. Let's give it a little bit more there. So You guys can see once you select your skin, it gives you so much ability to separate her from the background. I'm able to add luminance if I want to in the highlights and the gain. I can do the same thing in the shadows, right? I could do whatever I want with her in this case. So right about here, I'm just going to add some more highlights to her skin. Adjust that a bit, and great. She looks ready to rock and roll. The other thing that I would do is create another node, and I might denoise this a bit just because it looks like it's a little bit noisy over in the background here. So it's a little bit noisy. So what I'll do is I'll name this Denoise. Now I'll tell you guys that this particular feature is something that you only get in the studio version. So if you don't have the full version, you're not gonna be able to use this. But in our case, I have it, so we're gonna use it. So if you go over to this little icon over here, this is where we get our noise here. And what I'll do is I usually go to 2 frames. And then I will play around with the spatial luma. So I have it connected, and I'll just kind of start moving that around. And you probably can't really even see it on the computer, but once I start sliding that up, it really softens out the background and just removes some of that noise here. So I'll go right about there. And if I'm being honest, that looks good enough for me. Yeah, that is how I would color grade this image here. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's turn off everything. We started with our color space, and that converted this to a Rec 709. Then we did our color correction to get something a little bit more neutral where it wasn't too warm. Then we messed around with our primaries to give us a little bit more of a, I guess, cleaner look based on what we're going for. Then we added our curves to add some contrast to everything. Then what we did was we built our look, which is how that would look. It's just doing that separation to get that teal and orange kind of vibe. And what we did was we messed around with our skin tones to get that back to a neutral, realistic looking standpoint, adding some saturation and moving it over in the right direction on the primaries for our hue. So you went from that to that. That's pretty dramatic when you actually look at it. And then the last step that we did is we added some denoising. And then we have something that looks like this. Yeah, when I have a clip that's very similar to what I just worked on, so this is basically the same clip with the front shot of it. What I like to do is copy all of these nodes over to this one. And the way that you do that very easily is you select the node that you want to move everything over to. Then you right click on this node and you hit apply grade. And that, as you guys can see, did 90% of what we needed done here. Just a few little things that I would make some changes to here, which in this case, again, is going to be the skin. So if we go back here and we look at it, it's looking like a little bit too on the magenta side. So what I want to do is go back to my hue, and I'll just slide that over a little bit. Nothing major, no drastic changes there, so do that. And if you go back to the clip before, looks pretty much the same, which is great. And what I'll probably also do is just add a bit more highlights to the skin again, just so it separates from the background. And what I might do actually as well is go back to the look. And I just drop the background a bit more so it's not as bright. And that forces you guys to look directly at her while she's doing her workout. So if you look at it again, boom. Beautiful. Let's look at another one. So this is, again, another shot from the same sequence. It's another shot from the same sequence. Let's take a look here. So if we want to copy this look right over, do 90% of the work here, let's do that. And we can kind of see that this one and this one, because of the exposure, it is very different. So what I'm definitely going to want to do in this case is mess around with it a little bit more. So I'm going to go back to my primaries, and because it's very dark, let's also open back up our parade. We can see our darks are just absolutely getting crushed here. So first thing I'm going to want to do is bring those darks back up a bit. Oops, too much. So bring it up a little bit, not that high, somewhere around here. What I'm also going to want to do is bring up my mids a bit, just a little. I'm actually going to bring down my highlights as well. And then in my curves, we'll look at that as well. Go back to our curves here. Let's bring it up a little bit here, a little bit here. And then the other area that I'm very concerned is her skin tone. So I'm just going to do that again, and I'm going to hit Command H to kind of see what we have selected. And I'm also going to go back to the qualifier. And we can see here that not a lot of her skin is being selected at this angle due to the luminance change. So what we're going to do is go back and start messing around with the luminance. So we're going to want more selected. So let's do that. And let's also take a look at this. Yeah, we got to take a look at the saturation. So we need a little bit more of her skin here. So right about there is probably as good as we're going to get. Yeah, we're selecting a bit of her pants now as well because it is very close to the luminance of her thighs and her forearms, right? So it's going to start getting some of the pants as well, which is in this case okay. We're just going to make sure that our blur is okay and also that our denoise is okay. And what I'll do is I'll turn that back off by hitting Shift H. And what we're going to do now is go back to our vector scope. We can see here way too far, right? So let's go over to our hue and let's just bring that skin tone over a bit like that. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to mess around with some of the, see, if we go too far, you start seeing this, right? Because it hasn't selected this part of the clips and this part. So we're not going to do that. We're going to go back and we're going to let it blend. Be okay here. So something like that. Something like that. And what I might also do is go back into our look here. Go to our curves. I just add a bit of a curve right here. Right here. And just based on how the lighting was for this shot, I'm going to leave it right about here. I'm also going to look at my denoise. Yeah, we're okay. And if I compare it to the previous shot, it looks like they belong. So this one's going to be a little bit different because the look that we made for the other ones is not the same color or look or vibe. You can see it's a little bit brighter in the day. It's not the same location exactly. We're in a different corner of the room. So getting it, if we copy this look over to this clip, if we apply it here, you guys can see it's not what we're going for. It can work, but it's definitely not what we're going for. So the first thing we could do is I'm going to go back over to my my primaries, and I'm going to make a bit of an adjustment here. So let's go back to our parade as well. Just going to bring that down a little bit. I'm going to bring up her midtones, and I'm also going to bring up her highlights, and we can see everything is very green, right? So let's go back over to our color correction and let's make a little bit of an adjustment here. So that looks okay to me. Just take out just a little bit of the green, so something like that. Our curves, I think our curves are okay. We have enough contrast between her and her skin, so I'm okay with that. Our look, we're actually going to make an adjustment here. So we have this magenta. So I want the magenta in there, but I want it to be more blue. So I'm going to go here and just slide this over a bit. I'm really trying to get it to look like this, right? So the background here has this kind of bluish green type of look. On this one, I want something similar. So you guys can see that we're already starting to kind of look like that. And I think something like that is pretty close. Yep. Yep. Pretty close. And now we have to deal with her skin. So now her skin is starting to look off. So if you go back to our vector scope, put it on the skin, it's not too far off, but it is still a little bit over to the magenta side. So what I'm going to do is go over to our skin. Let's look at it again. And I'm going to mess with that hue again. Bring it over just a bit like that. That looks good to me. And then what I also want to do is I'm going to add some more saturation. I'm going to go too far. I'm going to come back a bit. Somewhere around there. I'm actually liking that. I am going to do one other thing here. I'm going to add another node. And I'm going to take our power windows. I'm going to grab our circle tool. I'm just going to make a circle around her real quick. So something like that. Something like that. And I'm going to spread it out to make it a bit softer. Come back down a bit so that it's staying within our person here. Something like that. Make it a bit softer like that. And then what I'll do is go back to our tracker here. And I'm just going to track it. Just going to hit play here. Davinci do its thing. Cool. Thank you very much. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this. And what I want to do is I'm actually trying to invert it first. And I want the background around her to be a bit darker. So again, I want that attention to come to her. So obviously that's too damn much. I'm actually going to spread this out just a little bit more. So bring that down just a little bit. Something like that. And I'm okay with that. Turn this off for a sec. And then if we look at what we just did here, we left her the way she looked, but we made the background around her a little bit darker. So if we just do a before and after, you can just kind of see. We're not losing any detail in the background, but we're just bringing our eyes and attention back to her. And then if we want to, again, I'm just taking a look at one thing on her skin. I just want to adjust her highlights on her skin a little bit more. Mess around with that a little bit. And I also want it to be just a bit warmer. So make her just a bit warmer. And then, yeah, if we look at before and after on the skin, so that's where we kind of were with when the look was applied, and then once we put her skin back, that's kind of where we went. Looks like the saturation's a bit high. Come back a little bit. Yeah, I'm cool with that. And then yeah, that's how we created the look for those 3 clips. A couple of things that I want you to pay attention to when you're working with colors in DaVinci is that the first thing that you want to make sure is that you are creating a color space transform. And then with your color space transform, you want to make sure that you're making the adjustments to your curves, primaries, or color correction before the color space transform node. And the reason why is because these kind of work in tandem with each other. So whatever is on this information happens in this information. And then this one goes over to this one, and so forth from you go from left to right. When you do your color space transform, this is where we're converting it into a Rec 709. So the best way to make these adjustments is going to be happening before you convert it into Rec 709. So yeah, that's pretty much my steps on how I color grade my footage in Davinci Resolve. As you guys can see, it's not anything too crazy or too major. It's just really just understanding how nodes work and then how to use them to your advantage. The most important takeaway that you want to make sure that you look at is your color space transform. That's going to make sure that all the colors that you work with in Davinci Resolve is going to be as accurate as possible, and it's going to allow you to manipulate the colors within the program without losing as much detail. If this video helped you guys, make sure you hit me with a like. And if you want more videos like this, make sure you leave them in the comments so I can go ahead and make more videos. But of course, guys, I just want to say thank you for watching. And remember to look, learn, and share. Take it easy, guys. Peace.